back to my channel. Today I've decided we're going to work on a Middie Blythe. I haven't worked on one in a long time. I'm pretty sure the last time I did, I said I would never try to do another custom Middie Blythe because they're small and it was hard. But I don't know, I guess I just got to do it. I want to try it anyway. So just for those of you who don't know, this is a Middie, M-I-D-D-I-E, Middie Blythe. Just to show you a comparison, that's beside of a real Blythe, a Neo Blythe, and then the other size is the petite Blythe. So you can see there's a huge difference. I did a custom petite once. Probably said I would never do that again too. That's a tiny doll to carve. Anyway, I wanted you to just know that up front, and then this is actually a official Middie bought from the official Blythe store, and so I'm not going to mess with her. So I have some parts here that we'll use. I have a body that's jointed, and a head, and the top of the head. Oh, both tops of the head. Now this comes with hands that you can do different hand gestures, and some more parts that I'm not really sure I remember what they're all for, because like I said, it's been a while since I did this. So basically what I'm going to do is take the head apart, and hopefully I'll remember at that point what I'm doing. But the process is really the same for customizing it. You're going to take the head apart, sand off the finish that's on here so you can get down to the natural skin. We'll have to make some new eye chips because I don't have any that you can buy or that I have bought. I have some that I've made before, so that's probably what we'll do. And then we'll repaint the face, add some more realistic looking eyelashes, put the body on, and come up with a nice outfit and some hair to match it. So this will probably be done in parts because it's going to take a while. So first part, let's try just taking the head apart and see what we can do. Now this is different from Blythe. Blythe has the pull strings on the back, and you pull the strings and the eyes will change from side to center to side to center. And when they have 4 different chips, so that the ball rotates inside the head. That's a mechanism I understand very well at this point. This one I have forgotten how it works, so we'll be exploring this again together. But basically it's a wheel back here that goes back and forth that makes the eyes simply go from side to side, and you could let it stop in the center if you wanted to. So let's try taking this apart and I hope luck will be with us. So first part, you have the back and the front has a lot of the mechanism and looks like little screws here to hold the mechanism in place. So the first thing we'll do then is to unscrew these. And you really want to make sure you keep track of your screws, because these little screws can really end up getting lost easily. So once we get them both out, I'm going to put them in a secure location. And that location is going to be inside this bag that has a lot of other parts in it. Alright, and I'm just going to put these spare parts over here to the side for now, along with the rest of the head. Alright, so if all goes well, we should be able to pull this out. Yay, we did. Alright, so now you can see how this looks. We're going to repaint the tops of the eyes. We're going to get rid of these very thick, false looking eyelashes, and then hopefully we'll be able to replace these chips. So first thing, I'm just gonna pull those out. and I have a good tool for that. Let me see if I can find it. I'm really refinding all of my tools from where I moved, but most of them are pretty much settled. So I have these hemostats that are really great for things like this because they really grip. Now, if I remember correctly, these eyelids were very thin and easily broken. So, just keeping that in mind as I pull these out. I don't want to break the eyelid. Ah! I don't think I broke it completely, but I popped it off. You could always soak this, you know, like in some hot water. That might help to get rid of the glue. Depends. This is very sticky. It's interesting. Like this, that's weird. That's so sticky. Like, I wonder why. That one is too. All right, well, we'll clean that off with something and reattach it. So there's a little, ooh, now that one I did break. Great. That's just great. So we're off to a good start here, breaking things. Let me see if I can just get rid of this and then I'll put it back together separately. Okay, I completely messed that up. This is why I like Blythe better, the bigger with dolls. All right, I'm going to turn the camera off for a minute and see if I can hunt down all the little pieces that I just broke here. And I'll be right back. So that did not work. Those pieces were too small. So I did find some more, another head that I had, and I'm going to just use the chips, the eyelids off of them and not worry about it. I'm going to just take the paint off with some acetone, and I will repaint these just to make sure they look nice because these were a little bit scratched up. And I'm going to just let them dry for a while because the acetone makes them a little bit sticky. This hard plastic doesn't work well with acetone, but it does take the paint off well, so that's why I like it. And fortunately, I didn't take any of my nail polish off. That was a good thing. So anyway, just set these aside, let these dry out, and we'll come back a little bit later and put some coats of just acrylic paint on them. And they don't show anyway, so it's really not like the Blythe eyelids. So the next step basically is to take all the color off of the face, and you have to do that with a sander because the acetone just will melt it and it'll be a big mess. So the other part of this is that it makes it be matte, which, you know, I definitely want it to be a matte look. I don't want it to be this shiny look. Some people may like that, but I don't. So we're going to take all of the color off with just some medium grit sandpaper. I use these little cubes that are actually for nails that I get off of Amazon in bulk, and they work pretty well. I like the spongy thing because it helps you get into the curves and the crevices on the face easier. This is the most annoying part. Then for the lips, I tend to usually have to scrape it off with the X-Acto knife because of the little thin area is too hard to get into with the sandpaper. So you do want to try to get this well sanded, and then also you're going to do the back because the back does show, especially on the middies, it just doesn't, the hair just doesn't cover it up. So you want to sand that off to get that nice and matte. There's no color on it, so you don't have to worry about that. Just, you know, quick sanding to make it matte. That way we'll match the front part of the face. Now the next thing we're going to work on is taking the eye chips out because we want to replace those. The factory eye chips are pretty uninspiring, to say the least. They're a very blunt color, and I want to try a little different technique with these eye chips anyway. So the way to do that is to get a glue stick like you use on a glue gun and heat the end of it and then stick it to the eye chip. Try not to get it on the white part, just the eye chip, because this is going to be how we pull it off. This is probably the safest way to do this without damaging the eye chip or the white area, and I'm really more concerned about that because I'm not going to use the eye chips. But we'll have to let these dry completely, so I'm going to just get them good and stuck and then set this aside, and we'll work on something else while they get completely hardened, and then we'll be able hopefully to pull the eye chips out without much ado. All right, and then we'll move on to another part of this project. All right, so at this point, what we want to do is to use a watercolor pencil and draw in how we want the face to look. And for this doll, it's going to mean enlarging the lip area a little bit and making it a little bit more defined, and also to make it a little bit wider because their mouths are really small on these middies. So this way it sort of gives us a little pattern to have where we're grinding or carving, so we don't get out of place and, carve somewhere we don't want to or whatever. I really feel like there's more real estate on the Blythe than on these middies, but you can certainly do a little bit to make their faces look a little bit different, and I think a little bit more natural, maybe a little bit more childlike. So this watercolor pencil easily removed. If you just dip a Q-tip in some water, you can get rid of it and go over it again however many times you want to. So this way I think I'm getting a pretty good idea of how I want the face to look. Just want to make those lips a little bit more prominent and rounded looking, and also the nose as well. Alright, so it looks like our eye chip glue has dried, so we're going to pop those out. As you see, they did come out fairly easily. I'm very happy about that. So we can just set these aside. I don't even need to try to remove these. I'm going to use my little grinding tool. Now this is actually for nails, but I like it because it's not, it doesn't go around and around like a drill. It's oscillating, so you can't really get hurt with it. You can put your hand right on it. But using these rounded tips really make it a whole lot easier to grind down some of these areas that you want to get a little bit of depth to. I do use an X-Acto knife on some areas, but I use that more for smoothing some areas and also just for some carving where I really want to carve hard into it. This rounded ball, and I have this rounded ball in 3 sizes too, so that's nice. But with the rounded end, it just does a nice job of sort of taking down some of the layer of the plastic. I've switched out now to a smaller ball, and every once in a while I will go back and just sand just to see where I am and make sure I'm getting the right shape. Now I'm using an X-Acto with a rounded blade to kind of smooth some of the areas. Once you get the depth that you want, using the X-Acto probably works a little better for me because you can go a little bit slower, and it also smooths it a lot better so you don't have any ridges where you've been carving. I also am carving out like the bottom of the lip and the sides a little bit more because I want to have the mouth be a little bit wider and protrude a little bit more. So since I'm not going to add anything to the top of the face, I have to take away to make it look bigger. So that's just really the process, the same as with the Blythe dolls. If you've watched my channel, you've seen me do that many times. Nothing new here, really the same process, but just a little different because it's a smaller face and you don't have as much room to work with or as much depth of the plastic to work with. So just going to continue working here on the doll and get it to where I want it to be. Do carve around the nose some to add a little bit of width and depth to that. I'll drill out the nostrils some also, because they're pretty much not drilled out. They're just like a very slight indentation, and I think it really adds to it to show those and have that be a little bit more defined on the face. So let's see where we are now. I think this is getting close to where we want it to be. So, you know, take your time, do some sanding and see where it is. But now I think we have her pretty much where we want her to be. And just to show you the difference, this is the real Blythe. You can see the width of the mouth is more exaggerated. The lips are a little bit thicker. And you'll also see that I've drilled out the nostrils some, and that the nose is not as pointed. The little pointy nose, I don't know where they like that. That's the same as Blythe, that really pointy nose. But I like it to be a little more childlike and rounded, so I'm pretty happy with the way this turned out. So we're going to take a segue now into my saga of the eye chips. I really deleted a lot of it because what I originally intended didn't work, but I did want to replace the eye chips because the ones that come with the doll are pretty bland and ugly, basically just ugly. So a long time ago I made these mold. I had, you know, the real chips, and I just stuck it down into some silicone. But they do have these ridges on the underside of the eye, and about all you can do is paint that. You know, it's just not a lot of area there to get creative with. So I decided I wanted to try to just mold a clear eye chip and take some of my Blythe eye art and reduce it down to the size of the Middie, and then put a clear chip over it and then use that for the eye chip. So that's going to be something new. But I'll tell you right now, my first attempt to do that didn't work. So we'll revisit that here in a minute. But what we're going to work on right now is putting color on the face. And I'm starting with some chalk pastels with a brush to color in the lips. You know, sometimes I like outline that with watercolor pencil just so I don't get messy. But however you want to do that is fine. But I did want to have some nicely defined pink little lips, and I think that's going to turn out just fine. And then the next thing we're going to work on is putting a little blush on the cheek. And I like to use a nice even brush. And this little girl is going to have freckles, so I actually added some blushing across the bridge of the nose where the sun would hit. And then we're going to put some freckles on top of that. Doing a little bit of shading with some light brown around the nose and around the underneath the lower lip. If you make a mistake, you can just put some water on a Q-tip like I just did, and it'll usually come off because I did put several coats of Liquitex matte medium down on the plastic of the face to protect it, and that also makes it easier to get rid of mistakes if you make any. It also protects the plastic from the color that you're using. That way, if you ever want to change the color, you can do that and it's not stained into the plastic. If you've ever had that happen, you know there's not much way to get rid of that other than sanding it off, and you don't have a lot of plastic to sand off here, so best to protect it. It also adds some grip to the pastels and the watercolor pencil, and helps to, I think, make the color a little bit more vibrant. Right now I'm just shading around the eyes some. There's no set way to do this. It's just my particular technique. I do like to put down some pastel chalk for the eyebrows and then go over that with the watercolor pencils to make it look like strokes. But I've just decided over time I like the way the effect is with having the chalk underneath and then the pencil marks over top. So that's what I was doing there, and then just doing a little bit more shading, different colors, whatever you like. I am putting some black on the inside of the eye just to help define that. I don't want to go into a lot of detail in terms of putting creases or things. I do have a little crease, but not a lot, because this is going to be more childlike. So I do just put that black around the inside of the eye. And now I'm going back in with a watercolor pencil, very sharp, to put in some hair-like marks. And I usually use a dark brown or a brown and black, more than one color, because I think that gives a little bit more dimension, which I like. So using a couple different colors here. And everybody does eyebrows differently, but the shape of the brow is really what's important. It can really add a lot to the expression of the doll. I think I have a video on that, in case you're interested. If you want to, you can always use the tip of your pencil with some water, because they're watercolor pencils. And I'm using that here to do the freckles. There's lots of ways to do freckles. I know some people who just will put it on a brush and flick it and let the splatters be the freckles. I'm not that brave, so I like to just use a toothpick, get a little bit of the paint. I'm dipping the watercolor pencil in the water to make it have the end be a little bit of the like watercolor paint, but thicker than it would be if I just dipped the pencil in it. And you can always go back and get rid of freckles if you don't like where they are. Just use that wet Q-tip. This is watercolor, so it'll come right off. But I really like the look of freckles on dolls like this. I think it really gives them a lot of character. If you need to, you can always pat it with a paper towel to make it a little bit more muted if you think you got it too vibrant. Here I was trying to get rid of one of the freckles that was a little bit too dark. But yeah, I think it's pretty cute. There's lots of expressions that you can do with these dolls. That's one reason I like working with them so much. But otherwise, I think she's turning out really cute and nice, and I think it'll go well with the red hair that I want to give her. Now this is the head. We're going to be working on the hair next. So this is 2 parts, and there's these little flaps, 3 little flaps that go up into a crease in the head. We'll glue this later once we get the hair on it, but I wanted to show you that. And then it just fits right on top. There's a groove that slips into it from the inside of the head. So I'm going to make a part. So I'm just going to mark it with the pencil and then use my X-Acto to cut out the part. And I do cut it a little bit open. I don't just make a slit. I actually go back and cut the 2 sides, because the hair is going to go in there and you don't want to make the head separated too much. So I'm going to use this very vibrant red, and this is Tibetan lamb wool that I'm using. I'm going to use this little tiny flat iron that I also got on Amazon, and that's important because I like to flatten the ends before I glue them down. If you wanted to use hair that you buy, you can always buy, I think, hair for Blythes and for Middie Blythes, but I like to do my own. So I like to comb out the ends, make sure I get them even, and then flatten them, because I am going to glue them, and having them flat makes the gluing process a lot easier, and make sure that you get all the strands attached. So I'm using my E6000, of course. I like these little tubes. They're just easier to handle, and you don't end up with half of a tube drying up, which I've always had with the big tubes. So I just put some between my fingers and squish it into the ends. And I'm doing this because I want to make the hair for the part. And I do that by making a really thick section, sticking it down into that area that I cut open. And that way you can spread it open and make a nice natural looking part. And it will then go from there, from the center, over the hair that you've glued down, and hide that last part that's glued down. So that's what I'm working on now, is to get enough of these little wefts glued together, and then I will put them all, put 2, 3, 4, 5 together, however many I need to make the width of that cut. And I also like it to be really thick because we're going to have to split it to make the part. So that's the process here. Once again, if you've ever watched me do videos of hair, I've done this with other dolls too, not just the Blythes, Monster Highs, whatever. Depending on how you want to do the part, this is going to have a center part. So I put the cut right up to the hairline in the front, but not all the way to the hairline in the back. So we let that part dry. Want it to be completely dry, and then you just split the head open, hold it open, and insert this thick weft down into it. And then we're going to glue it from the back. But you do want to make sure it's dry before you do this, because this glue can be kind of hard when it dries, or feel a little firm, and so you don't want any of that part sticking up, and this way you can really feel it. So now I'm just going to go along the two edges where the hair meets the plastic and put some more E6000. Now eventually I'm going to have to trim off the excess that's sticking up, because that second part that we're going to have to put against the scalp would not fit down over that lump, but it's a process. So you just want to make sure that it's all spread out and looks nice, and that there's no glue sticking up, because you want this part to be soft and easily parted to make the hair look really natural. And then we're going to just put this aside and let it get completely dry, and then we'll start putting the hair on the sides. But for right now, it's good to let it just dry, because you don't want to mess it up. That's always a problem with me. I get very impatient, and then I don't want to wait. Alright, so this has been drying for a while now, and we're going to come back and start putting some of the wefts down on the side. And I start at the bottom and work my way up to the part. And I'm putting that right up close to the part, because I want that to be hid. When we pull the part apart, it'll cover that glued portion. And it's just the same all the way around. Just keep putting the hair down, and then you just make a, come up and make a row on top of that until you get up to where the part is. And then you want to be a little bit more careful, because you don't want to get the glue on that hair that's going to be, coming out over it, because it'll make it look unnatural and hard. This Middie scalp is not a lot to it. As you can see, there's really not a lot, so you don't have to do a whole lot of work with this. Now you remember I said I didn't put the cut all the way to the hairline in the back. That's because I wanted to have some of this glued underneath it, and then use that hair to cover it up. So I'm just doing another row, and then this row, the last row, putting it right up close to where the part is, but making sure not to squish any of the glue into the part, to keep it underneath where the hair is, and it looks nice and neat this way. If you do get some, get a Q-tip and put it out. Now I like to let this dry, because we're going to have to flip it over to do the other side, and I don't want any of the hair sticking out to get stuck in any of the glue that might still be a little damp. But we're going to do basically the same thing to the other side, and then we can come back then and look at parting the hair. So yeah, now we're just going to let all that dry. I've already done the other side, so you didn't have to be tortured with that on this video. So now everything's dry. We're just going to split the hair apart and make our part, and then use some heat to squish it down. So this is the front, so you can see it looks pretty natural. The part looks pretty natural. That's the thing about gluing hair. You got to come up with a way to hide the glued part. But I've liked this technique. I do this with Monster Highs, Blythes, all the different dolls that I've done, because I think it ends up looking pretty natural. And with the E6000, it's waterproof, so you can wash the hair. It's really strong, usually tends to work well. So now I've got the parted weft held up, and I'm going in between to split it in two with the tail of a comb, and that's going to make our middle part. And after you do that, you can just go back, and there'll be a few little wefts here and there that you want to move to one side or the other to make it look like a nice even part. And after you get it where you want it, then you can apply some heat to it. And I use this little craft iron that you can get at Michael's or Amazon, wherever you get your crafts. Use more for sewing, where you would need to iron something in a little small area. But it works really well on dolls, on hair that doesn't melt. Now, this is wool. This is like, wool on your iron is the highest setting, so it can take the heat. And you can use your curling iron on it, your flat iron, whatever. So you don't have to worry about it. Now, you don't want to do that with synthetic hair, because it will melt it and probably burn you. So basically that's it. We're going to put this head on a little, and glue those where those flaps are, and then we'll cut the flaps off because they'll keep it from going down on the head. Like I said, I had to trim that inside part so that second part will go down in there, and then I used clamps to hold it down so that the glue could dry. But that's basically all there is to that. Once you have that part done, the head is pretty much finished, but you do want to let that glue completely dry before you cut those flaps off, because it's much harder to get those into the little slots if they're short. Because you do have to leave a little bit of a ridge between those two parts, because there's a part that slides in between that on the face plate and the back head plate. Alright, so we're going to glue that, let that sit, and then we'll be back in a minute and take that clamp off. But you can see I've put that clamp on there to hold it, and leaving that ridge. You see there's a ridge in between. Alright, now we're going to go back and work on our eye chips. So I did print off eye chips from my computer that I had reduced from the Blythe pattern. This is about maybe 3/4 the size. It's 1 centimeter or 10 millimeters. Blythe eye chips are 14 millimeters. So I was really lucky that my first attempt came out the exact right size. So yes, math is important in more than just school. I actually used math. So then I decided I was going to use some epoxy to make eye chips. But the first attempt, I made a mold with those old eye chips out of silicone, but it came out rough, so it didn't work. But I wanted to show you the two types of epoxy that I was thinking about using. And, I use epoxy a lot for different things. So I ordered these two different kits because the epoxy I had gotten old and yellow. This says fast cure, but that's a misnomer. This took about 8 hours to cure, and that's why I didn't use it. But it is a nice little kit. It came with its mica, colored mica, some gloves, some pipettes, little measuring cups, pouring cups, measuring cups, stirrers, some tweezers, and then the 2-part epoxy. So that's one type of epoxy, and probably the most common is what you've seen is the 2-part epoxy. But I didn't really want to spend 8 hours waiting for this, so what I did is try this other kit that was a 1-part epoxy, but using a UV light, and this is that kit. And that's the one I ended up using. So this kit had these cute little silicone cups to pour, which I really like because you can reuse them because the epoxy doesn't stick to it. If you use the plastic ones, it'll stick to it, and then you just have to basically throw it away. It also came with this nice silicone mat that you can do your work on, and then if you spill like epoxy on that, it's not going to harden on a table and be impossible to remove. It'll just pop right off. So you get this bottle of the 1-part epoxy. You get this cute little UV lamp, similar to what you would use on your fingernails if you were using gel nail polish to harden. And it has little side legs that pop out. It has 3 timers. It has a 60-second, 90-second, 150-second. So you can choose. And it has a USB cord. You can either charge it or you can use it plugged in. And I happen to have a USB to 110 plug that I could plug the USB in. So I was able to do it without having to wait, which is always good for me because I am never patient. So we're going to pull out the little silicone mat and use that. As best I could tell, the thickness is what determines how long you leave the UV light on, and I ended up using it for about 90 seconds, I guess. Now, I ended up not being able to use my original mold with this because the chips turned out to be rough on the bottom. And I decided then I was just going to use an old Blythe mold that I had and just not fill it up all the way. So I knew I needed the width to be 1 centimeter, so I would just try to fill it into these old Blythe chip mold. And I knew it was clean because I had just scrubbed it about a day ago, but honestly, every lint and dirt in your house will go to silicone, so you do have to watch that. All right, so we're just going to pour some of this 1-part epoxy in one of these adorable silicone pourers and attempt to pour this into the mold and not fill it all the way up. So I kind of have an idea, you know, from looking at the old Middie chip, how much to put. It ended up that I didn't get them all exactly the same, which is fine. I mean, they ended up being fairly similar, but you know, I just would look at it and measure it, and if I needed to add a little bit more, I could, but was filling it up about 2/3 or 3/4 full. Then I put the light over it and let it cure for 90 seconds. You can also put the light over your little silicone cup and cure that quickly to get rid of that, and just pull it out. And then then you got your cup ready to use again. I really like that. So we have our chips molded, our little clear chips. So then you can just pop those out. And I did let them cool a bit and you know, make sure, because I wasn't sure that I had left them in long enough, but I left them a little bit on that silicone mat to make sure they were completely dry. And that seemed to work really well, and they came out very, very clear. They weren't yellow. They didn't have the rough edges that the other one I tried did. So now we're ready to apply them to the colored artwork and make the chip. And I found 2 that were the closest in size. I always use this Loctite super glue when I'm doing Blythe eye chips. I tested every glue there was, and this was the only one that didn't seem to make the ink run or make it look cloudy. I'm sure maybe there's other people who use something different, but this is what always works for me, and I like it because you can apply a small amount, and you don't need much because you're going to press this down on top of the chip. And you have to do it fairly quickly because it's super glue, but you want to get it centered, press it completely down so that you don't have, you know, a lot of excess glue between the chip and the artwork. And then you want to leave it alone and not mess with it because it doesn't dry instantly, as I have found to my chagrin, that it will move. So after this has dried, then I just go in and cut out around the edges and get them nice and even. And then we're ready to put them into the eye mechanism. So these have been cut out. They turned out really nice. I'm very happy with this experiment. And now I know I can make Middie eye chips if I need to. Now, I always put a little bit of Elmer's glue on my Blythe eyes when I put the chips in. Just a tiny bit. You don't need a lot. I'm just wanting to have a little insurance there to hold it in place. Especially with Blythe, because you mess with them a lot. And the chips can fall out if they don't fit 100%. So I'm just putting a little tiny bit of Elmer's down in the bed and smoothing it around with a Q-tip. And then we're just going to pop the eyes in, and they just fit perfectly. I can't believe this. I'm shocked, my first attempt. I think they turned out really nice. So, yay. I hope if you try that, it'll work as well for you. You just have to make sure you get it the right size. And, you know, if you have artwork, if you don't, there are lots of places that sell artwork, Etsy or different places that you can go. All right, so we had our head glued together, which is now completely hardened. And we're ready to cut off those flaps. Otherwise, it gets in the way of putting the head back together. So you just want to cut it off even with the base as much as you can. And then we're going to start putting some eyelashes on the eyes, and that'll be the next step. But I wanted to just go ahead and get this out of the way. So I'm just using fake eyelashes. I buy them at Miss A online. If you've never been there, they have cheap $1 makeup, and they have cheap eyelashes. Because eyelashes can be pretty expensive, and you don't want to get into a lot of expense buying false eyelashes for dolls. It just adds to the cost. So we're going to trim these and glue them to the top of that eyelid, and then we'll put those eyelid chips that I pulled off earlier and painted on top of that, and that hides the edge of the eyelash where you glued it. It doesn't show once you have the doll put back together, but I mean maybe just a little tiny bit, but it's not like Blythe's where you open the eyes and you can completely see the eyelid and you want to have it nicely decorated. Alright, so we got the eyelashes on, and then we're going to go back and put some glue on top of that, and then put the eyelid chip that I painted a dark brown on top of the eyes. Then of course I am going to set that aside and let it completely dry, but then we're going to use the magic of editing to come back quickly here and put the head together so we don't have to actually wait on the video. Alright, so that's going to dry, and now we're ready to put the head together. Yay, we're actually going to put the whole body together. So we've got all of our pieces, and we got the head, and I usually start by putting the eye mechanism into the front part of the face, and it has some screws that we need to put back in to hold it in place. But I think it's going to turn out really cute. I'm so happy with the way these eyes worked. Alright, so we have those two holes that we took the screws out of, so we got to put those screws back in, and that's always hard for me with long fingernails. But it's something you have to do. So once you make sure you've got it in place, then we'll take our little screwdriver or screws and get those screwed back in. We're going to speed that up because that's a torturous thing to watch as much as it is to do. Get those nice and tight, and then your head is in place and our eyes work perfectly. Yay! Love the green color. Turned out so nice. So you can see the difference in that sort of odd green color in the original and the ones that we made together. Nice and clear too. Very nice. Alright, so now you're going to need about 8 hands. You're going to put that head into that square area on both the front and the back. And sometimes that has an extra piece in it, and if it does, you have to flip it out. So you can see this one has it makes the square smaller, but it's easy. You just take something sharp and pop it right out. So there's different bodies that you can get to put on dolls, and they might have a different mechanism. All right, so now we've got that ready. So you have to pull the hair away from the scalp because you're going to have to fit it into that ridge. You see that little ridge? That's going to go into the front. And you just slide that in. Make sure you get it all the way up. Hopefully we did a good job of gluing those together so that it'll work properly. I don't know why I always feel like I need to be an octopus when I do this. Like I need 8 different hands. But anyway, just slide that on until it is flush with the front of the face. If you've got that the right width, it should be flush, completely flush with it. Now I'm doing this in normal time. It takes, I just wanted you to see it. So it does meet, so that's good. And then you have to pull all the hair away from the back. I didn't want to speed this up because I didn't know if you'd done this before or not. And I'm not sure if I've shown this on a Middie. It's about the same for a Blythe, not completely, but almost. And then you just pop the head together. And there's 2 clips on either side of the face that will click, snap together. And then you have 2 screws down at the bottom you put in. But you should not have a gap between the 2 sides. All right, so there's our girl with lots and lots of red hair. Her neck does swivel, does have that mechanism. And she has the sweet tiger body, so it does have the boobies, but you know, they're not so big that you can't make her look childlike. It's just that that's how they come generally. So I had a couple of outfits. I like this one. This came from Rabbit in the Moon on Etsy. That's a little store in Thailand that does Blythe clothing. They're usually pretty reasonable. And they're not super cheap looking like some are. And I had this other one, but I didn't like the hat. I didn't think the hat would look good on a Blythe head. It looked a little too small. Might work on a smaller doll, like a petite or a OB11. So I'm going to take the hands off to make putting this shirt on a little bit easier. And by the way, I had tremendously hard time getting the hands back on. If you ever have that happen, just take some sandpaper and sand the ball at the end of the hand wrist. It needs to be made a little bit smaller to snap back in there. I'll have that sometimes with these dolls. With the hands, it's just a little bit hard to get them back in. All right, so we got the blouse on. Now we're going to put the little overalls on. They're so cute. That's really adorable. And I like that it's green. It's going to match her eyes really well. I like the trouser look. I think that's cute on a doll, like a childlike sort of doll. Those stars, the Rabbit in the Moon, they always put confetti of some type in the packages. So those little gold stars fell out when I opened it. That's cute. That's always something different too. So I'm going to put the straps over the shoulders, and she doesn't have a whole lot of shoulder real estate, so you just have to pull it up as best you can. And then we'll attach the Velcro in the back. I do sometimes make clothes for dolls, but I'm not thrilled with making little tiny clothes. It's not something I love, especially when they get smaller than Blythe. So I'm going to cut out where I struggled with the hand. This one went on easier than the other one. The other one I did have to actually sand some, but not impossible. You can do it. And she does have interchangeable hands, so if you wanted to change her hands, you didn't want to have to go through this every time. So yeah, I cut out all that part, and I'll put the hand on later. But this is my box of Middie Blythe and Petite Blythe shoes, and I have those cute little brown boots. I have the exact same boot in black, so I was thinking either one of those might look good. I have these other cute shoes, but I decided I didn't want to use those. I really think for the outfit, I think either would work, but I just think that the brown looked better, so we're gonna go with brown. Black would have worked because she has that black up around the neckline, but I don't know, I just think they look more like brogans, you know. So yes, so now we're gonna put the socks on, and speeding this up a little bit because it always takes a while to put on the socks and shoes, but they're super cute. They're really adorable little boots. And then we'll have her fully dressed, and then we can work on the hair. So she's got that hair that's all over the place. I mean, you could just straighten it, you could curl it, you could do whatever, because like I said, it's heat resistant, it's wool. You could do whatever you want to with it. What I decided to do was to just curl it all over and did some just haphazard curls. I use a little 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch curling iron that I got on Amazon. Yes, on Amazon. Everything comes from Amazon. And then I just sort of take the tail of a comb and pull the curls out. Now, I will say that both alpaca and this Tibetan lamb hair do not hold curled well. If you want it to hold better, you can put hairspray on it before you curl it. You can put spray on it after too, but I didn't do that because I wanted it to look pretty soft, because I want to try putting some hats on her. I'm going to sell this doll, so I'm going to try one hat on her, but then I ended up using a different hat that I found later. So I had this cute little lamb hat that a friend of mine made that I'm going to put on her, and I just wanted her hair to look kind of messy. That's why I didn't want to put a lot of hairspray on it and make it stick together or look too curled, too much like doll hair, more like kid hair. I mean, you could, even cut it and give her bangs if you wanted to. There's lots of things you could do. I ended up recurling it when I took this hat off and put a couple of barrettes in it on either side to do some photos, and then I used a different hat, a brown toboggan knitted hat, which I thought went with her outfit a little bit better. Also, I kind of don't want to sell this lamb hat because it's really cute and somebody made it for me. So yeah, so we're kind of nearing the end here. I mean, it looks cute on her, I have to say. I love these little animal hats like this on these dolls. It really does add to that childlike quality. But that's pretty much the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed making this Middie with me, and I'm going to include some shots of the doll that I made afterwards for you to enjoy, and hope to see you soon.